Let me tell you something. When a nation decides it's done playing someone else's game, it don't start by flipping the board. No, it starts by moving one piece, just one, a silent shift, a quiet decision. That's exactly what India just did. While the world was busy watching stock tickers and chasing headlines, India made a move so bold, so unapologetically powerful, that the entire financial axis of the globe just tilted. India dropped the dollar. Let that sink in for a second. Now I know what you're thinking. Why would a country walk away from the very currency the world's been bowing to for decades? Why abandon the so-called king of global trade? Let me tell you why. Because when a king starts acting like a bully, when that throne gets built on fear instead of fairness, sooner or later, folks gonna stop kneeling. India ain't in the mood to kneel no more. India just stood up and said, "We'll walk with those who walk with us." And just like that, India joined hands with China and Russia. Now that ain't just 3 countries signing some piece of paper. That's over 3 billion people. That's nuclear power, oil reserves, semiconductor production, artificial intelligence, and deep-rooted civilizations coming together. That's centuries of knowledge, billions of brains, and a brand. New financial future rising right before your eyes. You ever seen a chess game where the queen don't move until she knows the king's cornered? That's India right now, calculated, strategic, silent, but deadly effective. This wasn't about shouting from the rooftops or broadcasting on every news channel. This was about principle, about positioning, about power, the kind of power that don't need to flex to be felt. You feel it in the silence. You feel it in the markets. You feel it when you realize that one of the world's biggest economies just decided, no more dollar dependency. See, for too long, the global economy's been run like an exclusive club. You either pay your dues in dollars or you don't get in. Want to buy oil? Pay in dollars. Want to trade tech? Pay in dollars. Want to invest in infrastructure? Better have those dollars. It was a rigged system, plain and simple. And every time someone tried to step out of line, they got sanctioned, isolated, or democratically corrected. But here's what they didn't count on. India was watching. Not just watching, learning how to build resilience, learning how to create backup systems, learning how to make moves without making noise. So when India announced it would start trading in local currencies, when it said the rupee would stand tall beside the ruble and the yuan, it wasn't just a financial move. It was a statement, a declaration, a challenge to a system that's been lopsided for far too long. Now you might hear people say, "But Jack, it's just trade agreements. It's just currency swaps." Don't get it twisted. This is about independence. This is about sovereignty. This is about a nation saying, we refuse to let someone else hold the leash to our future. You think this move was sudden? Oh no, this move was decades in the making, brick by brick. Law by law, deal by deal, India has been slowly, methodically building an alternative path, and now it's walking it, with allies at its side. Let's talk about China for a minute. The dragon don't roar unless it sees a storm coming. And that storm has been brewing for a long time. China's been pushing the digital yuan, setting up cross-border payment systems, establishing trade corridors across continents. And India just stepped onto that platform, not as a follower, but as a partner. 2 of Asia's giants, finally moving in sync. Now throw Russia into that equation. A country that's taken every sanction the West could throw and still keeps marching. Why? Because they ain't playing checkers. They are playing chess. And when India aligns with that kind of resilience, that kind of grit, you better believe the world's gonna feel it. This ain't just about avoiding the dollar, it's about creating a whole new table to sit at. And guess what? The invitations don't say USD required anymore. You ever see an elephant walk through a jungle? It don't need to stomp. Every step changes the landscape. That's India, steady, grounded, But when it walks, the ground listens, and this time India just walked away from dollar dependency like it was yesterday's news. No drama, no declarations of war, just a simple move with seismic consequences. Think about the message this sends to Africa, to Southeast Asia, to Latin America. All those nations tired of being told what to do, how to trade, who to align with. India's saying, there's another way. A path where you don't have to beg for aid with strings attached. A path where your own currency has value, where your own people get to decide your economic destiny, and you better believe those countries are listening. They're watching India, because if India can do it, maybe they can too. Maybe the days of being shackled to one financial empire are finally coming to an end. And maybe, just maybe, the future ain't American dominated anymore. Maybe it's multipolar. Maybe it's collaborative. Maybe it's Indian. Now don't think for a second this ain't gonna rattle cages. Oh, it's already got people nervous. You can see it in the headlines. India's risking its future. They say this could hurt its global standing. But let me ask you, when did doing what's best for your people become a risk? When did saying, we'll chart our own course, become a threat? I'll tell you why they're scared. Because India's move exposes the cracks in the system. It shows that the dollar ain't divine, that power ain't permanent, that one nation's monopoly over global finance can and will be broken. Not by war, not by weapons, but by wisdom, by unity, by the will to walk alone until others follow. India ain't alone anymore. It's walking alongside those who have already seen the truth. And they're building something bigger than trade, bigger than currency. They're building trust. A new kind of economic order where no single country holds the remote control. Where your growth ain't dependent on someone else's approval. Where your worth ain't measured in how many dollars you hold, but how much value you create, and the value India brings to the table, unmatched. A billion-strong workforce, cutting-edge technology, a booming digital economy, a cultural capital that spans centuries. This is a country that sent rockets to the moon on a budget smaller than Hollywood movies. You really think it can't rewire its financial future? Oh, it's doing it. It's already done it. And what does this mean for you, for me, for anyone paying attention? It means the world's changing fast. And if you're still stuck thinking the dollar is the only door to opportunity, you're already behind. The smart ones are watching India, learning from India, and aligning with India. Because the future don't belong to those who cling to the past. It belongs to those bold enough to create something new. You see, India ain't anti-West. It's just pro-India now. That's the difference. It ain't about burning bridges. It's about building highways in new directions. Toward Asia, toward Eurasia, toward nations that respect sovereignty, not just tolerate it. Nations that believe in mutual growth, not manipulation. This isn't isolation. This is innovation, and don't think for a second that this is where it ends. No, no, no. This is just the beginning. Once you drop the dollar, you start asking new questions. Like, why should global trade routes still run through the same old ports? Why should a flow be governed by the same handful of corporations? Why should the rules of the digital economy still favor the few? India's asking those questions, and it's finding answers. With Russia's energy, with China's infrastructure, with BRICS nations rising, with African leaders shaking hands not to beg but to build. A silent revolution is unfolding, not in the halls of Western power, but in the hearts of countries long underestimated, and India's the heartbeat of that revolution. And let me say this, loud and clear, this ain't about hate. This is about hope. Hope that one day the world will be run not by fear, not by force, but by fairness, where a nation's worth ain't based on how many bombs it has, but how many dreams it dares to chase. That's the world India's building now, one currency swap at a time, one trade agreement at a time, one bold move at a time, so the next time somebody tries to downplay this moment, next time they say, it's just economics, you look them in the eye and say, no, it's history. History being rewritten in real time, not with speeches, not with summits, but with action, with clarity, with courage. India dropped the dollar, and the world just got a wake-up call. Whether you like it or not, the game has changed. The board has shifted, and the players, they're playing smarter now. The question ain't who's holding the crown. The question is, who's holding the future? And if you ask me, I think India just put both hands on it. It marked the birth of India's assertive military doctrine backed by innovation. This is not just an economic shift, it's a civilizational reawakening driven by sovereignty. You see, when a country like India decides to shake off the chains of dependency, it doesn't just impact the global trade system, it triggers a psychological quake. Because for centuries, India has been told to play by rules written in foreign tongues, shaped in foreign capitals, enforced by foreign institutions. And yet here we are, witnessing the country unshackle itself not just economically, but spiritually, politically, and militarily. India's decision to step away from the dollar-dominated system and align itself with alternative powers like China and Russia wasn't just a reaction to current events. It was a calculated awakening rooted in the need for civilizational dignity. For too long, India's history has been interpreted through the lens of colonizers, its decisions dictated by fear of isolation, its ambitions tempered by the risk of sanctions or backlash. But now, a different India is emerging. An India that doesn't ask for permission to define its role on the world stage. An India that understands the value of its own identity, its own culture, its own intellectual wealth. This new posture is evident in the way India is approaching its military doctrine. No longer satisfied with simply reacting to threats, India is taking proactive steps to ensure its strategic autonomy is real, not theoretical, not symbolic, but tangible. That means weapons made in India. That means intelligence operations informed by Indian logic. That means borders defended by doctrines that do not borrow from outdated foreign playbooks, but evolve from India's own geopolitical reality. The decision to drop the dollar is tied directly into this logic, because economic sovereignty isn't a standalone concept. It is interwoven with military strength, diplomatic leverage, and civilizational confidence. The moment India said no to the dollar and yes to the rupee, it wasn't just about swapping currencies. It was about rejecting control, control through SWIFT, control through sanctions, control through manipulated interest rates and financial surveillance. It was about telling the world, we will not be cornered into submission by someone else's economy. And as soon as India made that declaration, the defense apparatus responded in kind. Military thinkers began restructuring strategies around the idea of self-reliance. Joint exercises shifted focus from imitation to innovation. Procurement plans began to prioritize domestic capabilities, and suddenly the doctrine began to evolve, not out of panic, but out of purpose. You've got to understand, sovereignty is not something that exists in one domain. It spreads like wildfire once it ignites. The same spirit that fuels currency independence fuels cyber defense. The same determination that breaks away from Western financial dependency also rejects foreign domination in space, AI, and defense production. India is connecting the dots. When you look at what India is building with Russia in terms of defense agreements, or how it's exchanging energy with China in non-dollar terms, you realize this is not some fragmented reaction. It's a coordinated civilizational revival. The same civilization that once led the world in mathematics, metallurgy, and medicine is now rewriting rules in warfare, intelligence, and economic diplomacy. And don't think for a second that this doctrine is just about tanks and missiles. No, it's about strategic posture. It's about psychological dominance. India is beginning to project a confidence that says, "We are not the India you think you remember. We are not waiting for your validation anymore." That posture changes how the world negotiates with India. It changes how borders are managed. It changes how allies are chosen. It even changes how conflicts are avoided, not through submission, but through deterrence backed by indigenous strength. This is a new kind of strength. The kind that comes from knowing you don't have to beg the IMF or the World Bank for lifelines. The kind that comes from having alternatives to NATO-style dependencies. The kind that comes from leveraging culture, tech, and alliances in equal measure. It's holistic. It's strategic, and it's here to stay. Dropping the dollar is just the surface. It's the signal flare. Beneath it lies a massive engine of civilizational renewal powered by sovereignty. When India sends satellites into space, it does so now with its own navigation systems. Not because GPS isn't good enough, but because depending on another nation's eyes in the sky is a strategic liability. When India makes drones and missile systems, it uses its own chips, its own coding language, its own scientists, not because foreign tech is bad, but because foreign control is worse. That is the philosophy behind this doctrine. Control your destiny, or someone else will. And what better way to declare control than by walking away from the one currency that has dictated global submission for decades? You need to recognize the symbolism here. The dollar isn't just a piece of paper. It is a statement of global hierarchy. It says, trade with me on my terms or stay out of the game. But now India is building its own game, not to isolate, but to innovate, not to resist global trade, but to redefine it. That redefinition is why this isn't just an economic pivot. It's a civilizational one, because when you reimagine money, you reimagine power. When you reimagine power, you reimagine your place in history. And when you reimagine your place in history, you awaken something that's been sleeping for centuries. India isn't waking up to modernity. India is waking up to itself, to its roots, to its legacy, to the fact that it was never a follower in the first place. It was simply interrupted. Colonization, partition, debt traps, soft invasions. Those were the tools of interruption. But now the silence is over. The rupee speaks. The policy speaks. The posture speaks. The military speaks. The doctrine is no longer defensive. It's decisive. That doctrine is not born out of fear. It's born out of frustration. Frustration with being misunderstood. Frustration with being used as a pawn in someone else's geopolitical chessboard. Frustration with having to explain why India chooses who it chooses, why it trades how it trades, why it arms the way it arms. Now India's actions are doing the talking. It's saying, you don't have to understand it. You just have to respect it. That is sovereignty. That is what dropping the dollar represents, and the military understands this better than anyone. You can't build long-term national security if your economy is built on dependency. You can't talk about air superiority if your defense budget is at the mercy of external credit lines. You can't guarantee deterrence if your communication systems run on foreign platforms. This is why India's military thinking is no longer about simply buying more, it's about building smarter. It's about being able to go to war without having to go to Washington first. It's about being able to act without waiting for approvals from international committees designed to serve the interests of a few. India is done waiting. The shift in currency is mirrored by a shift in battlefield philosophy. Autonomous systems, indigenous doctrine, asymmetric warfare tactics. These are the conversations happening in India's defense corridors now. And those conversations aren't influenced by think tanks in London or panel discussions in Brussels. They're shaped by the ground realities in Ladakh, in Arunachal, in the Indian Ocean. They're shaped by realpolitik, not romanticism. That's the kind of doctrine that scares global powers, because it means India is no longer trying to join a club, it's building a new house altogether. And the doors of that house aren't closed. In fact, they're wide open to nations that want equitable partnerships, not extractive ones. To regions that have been locked out of the dollar economy and are looking for another way. To people who see sovereignty not as isolation, but as responsibility. India is stepping into that responsibility with a seriousness that the world didn't expect. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's steady, calculated, relentless. That relentlessness is key, because civilizational reawakening isn't a campaign. It's a mindset. It's waking up every day knowing you represent more than a flag. You represent the dreams of ancient knowledge systems, the power of diversity, the resilience of centuries of struggle. And when a country like that decides to move on from the dollar, it ain't just about economic alternatives. It's about spiritual restoration. India is restoring what it means to be Indian in a world that constantly tried to erase that very identity. That restoration is strategic. The partnerships with China and Russia aren't just pragmatic. They're philosophical. Because these nations, too, have been marginalized, boxed in, underestimated. And now they're building something together, not to compete with the West, but to complete what the world is missing: balance. Multipolarity, sovereign dignity, that is the civilizational project India is investing in. So when we say India dropped the dollar, we're not just talking about payment systems, we're talking about a full system reset. A new protocol for engagement, a new signal to the world. We are no longer passengers on this journey. We're building our own roads with our own vehicles, and we're choosing who rides with us. That confidence is contagious. And the world is watching, not because it's surprised, but because it never thought this moment would come so soon. India wasn't supposed to wake up this fast, but it has, and now nothing will be the same again.